Parents, teachers, anyone who's ready to learn during this crazy time, I started these videos to keep my kids learning while reviewing during the quarantine. Realized I can use them forevermore, so I'm going to stick with them. If you have any questions, you want to email me. My email is connollymathathome@gmail.com. My goal is to keep my students learning, also to help parents. We learned things a different way back in the day. And I want to help you understand what your kids are learning and so you can help them at home. So today we're going to tackle volume, and it's kind of hard to teach because I'm going to have to draw some rectangular prisms, but let's give it a try. So in 4th grade, boys and girls, you learned about area, okay? So area is when we have a flat shape, a two-dimensional shape. And we're going to call this width, and we're going to call this length. And I make a little cursive L so it doesn't look like a 1. So if you're wondering why in the world I do that. So length, and we have width, and the space inside is known as the area. Okay? So when you use the area model, there's a relationship here. If the length is 3 and the width is 4, the space inside would be 3 units this way, 4 this way, and it would be 12 square units. Do you see the square units? Okay, so when we multiply length times width, we end up with square units because there's 2 dimensions. So just as a reminder, I'm going to write it down here. Area equals length times width, because that's going to come back in and be important. So that is how we would find the area. Again, we end up with square units when we're talking about area because you're multiplying 2 dimensions. So if this was 3 inches times 4 inches, your area would, that's it, your area would be 12 inches squared. Okay, and that's how we write that up here. It does not go before the inches, it goes after the inches. If you write it before the inches, you're saying that you're squaring 12, and we are not doing that. Okay, so that's a review of what you learned in 4th grade, and let's talk about volume in 5th grade. So area was the space inside a 2-dimensional shape. Volume is the space inside a 3-dimensional shape. So here we have a rectangular prism, and this is all about the volume of a rectangular prism. Different shapes, different formulas, so we have to make sure that we don't make that mistake. So, volume, 3 dimensions, because you see this is now coming out of the paper. It's no longer a flat shape with length and width. It has 3 dimensions, so it says length and width, but it has 1 more. So if you recall in class, I made a big deal about you knowing which dimension was which. So we're going to go over that again. I'm going to use 3 different colors to talk about it. When you are given a prism, a rectangular prism, you need to do the length, width, and height labeling. I'm going to show you again. You need to determine the 3 different dimensions that you're going to multiply together. So the first thing you need to know, when we think about how wide a shape is, width, wide, okay, that's what's going to be here in green. That is our width. When we're thinking about 3-dimensional shapes written on paper like this, your length is going to be the one that is headed back into the paper, okay? It looks like it's going into the paper, that's your length. And then you're going to have your height, which is how tall something is, the height. And so we can clearly see the height here in orange, okay? So with area, you had 2 dimensions, you multiplied length times width. With volume, you have 3 dimensions, and you are going to multiply length times width times height. And you are not going to have square units, you are going to have cubic units. So instead of when I did the little 2 floating in the air to say that we were squaring, we are going to make a 3, which represents the 3 dimensions that you're multiplying together. That's why it's cubic units. If you remember also, friends, in my class, we put those packages inside. We had those little boxes and put the packages in it to see how many fit. So that's where you're getting the cubes that fit inside. Okay, so cubic units. All right, so let's get started. I'll just draw a new one up here. Sorry, it takes me a second to get the drawing done, but, oops. All right, so let's say we have a rectangular prism, and then there's numbers labeled in all different places. There's 6 inches here, 4 inches here, 3 inches here, and then they're going to ask you what is the volume of the rectangular prism. So, in my class, and there is no exceptions to this, you are going to always identify what is the length, what is the width, and what is the height, and you're going to label it, because sometimes you're going to see those cubes, and you're going to have to find the 3 different dimensions. So, we see this one going back into the paper. You are going to label that the length is 4 inches every single time, boys and girls. You are going to label the width, how wide it is. Width is 6 inches. Then you're going to locate the height, and you're going to say the height is 3 inches. Okay? Please do this each and every time, even if it's given to you, because sometimes it's not going to be given to you and you're going to have to figure it out. Not negotiable. Do it. All right, so let's use purple. We haven't used it yet. So when I am solving, I am going to write volume equals length times width times height. That is what we call our formula. And then right underneath, I'm going to write the length is 4 inches. We're multiplying by the width, which is 6 inches, and then the height, which is 3 inches. Okay, I knew this was going to be hard on this miniature board, so I have to erase my friends here. Okay, so now we have to multiply all 3 together. Now, you are going to be tempted to add 2 products together, but that's not how it works. I want you to go down the paper. Okay, 4 times 6 is 24. Then you're going to check off that you did these ones, and then multiply by 3. Okay, you do not have to use a standard algorithm every single time you multiply. 6 times 20 is 6, or 3 times 20 is 60. 4 times 3 is 12. If I combine those 2 in my head, I get 72. But we're not done yet because it needs a correct label. So you are going to label 72 inches, because that's what the unit I gave you. If it's feet, you label feet. If it's yards, you label yards. And your 3 is floating up here, and it would read 72 inches cubed. Okay, so to repeat the steps we took, we labeled where we found the length, the width, and the height in the picture that was given to us. We wrote the formula, we plugged it in, we multiplied it out, and then we labeled every single time. If you're doing this on the computer, which, because we're in quarantine right now and that's how I'm getting assignments, you can write 72 cubic inches if we can't figure out how to put the 3 up there. And that's allowed. It's the same, they say the same thing. Okay? So that is one way to find the volume. The other way, I'm hoping I can illustrate on this. So, the other way that we can determine the volume of a shape is by thinking about the area, okay? In this picture, the length and the width are represented by the space down here. So if it was a flat shape, here it would be, and that is called the base. So when you see a story problem or anything give you the base, that's what they're talking about. The base is length times width. So base is length times width, which just means the area of the bottom layer of the box. Okay? So we have a bottom layer here, and then the height determines how many layers of that base that we're going to make. Okay? So sometimes they're going to give you the base, and then what do? Well, there is another formula for volume. If you already know the length times width, because volume is length times width times height, if they give you the base, then you do base times height. So the other formula for volume is base times height. Okay, so if they give you the three dimensions, the length, the width, and the height, you choose to use this formula. If they give you the base, the square units of the base, then you would use this formula. So what might that look like in a picture that you're given? Well, let me re-scribble this so I don't have to draw a million different rectangular prisms today. So they might say that base equals 18 inches squared. Oh man, I really want to make that look good. Squared. Okay, so they might tell you your base is 18 inches squared. Sometimes they draw an arrow to the base and write base equals 18 inches squared. Then you might get your height as, let's say 4 inches today, 4 inches. Okay, so they're not going to give you the length. They're not going to give you the width. They're going to give you the base and the height. This is another situation, okay? How do I know they're giving me the base? If they give you a dimension that says squared, you know they're talking about area because that's how we label area. There's 2 dimensions, we get square units. So this is a little hint. When you see the dimensions have a 2 floating in the air here, 18 inches squared, you say ding, 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 ding. I use volume equals base times height to solve. So just like we did in the last one, you're going to plug in what you know. We do not know the volume, but we do know the base is 18 inches squared. We know the height is 4 inches. So then we solve 18 times 4. I just want to remind you, you're really good at mental math. Don't forget, 10 times 4 is 40. Oh, I made it the same. Oh, my bad. 4 times 8 is 32. When we add them together, we get 72 inches cubed. And we're still labeling it like we always would. Sorry, this board was a little bit messier than others, but the big thing that I need you to remember is that you are identifying the dimensions, and I want you labeling them length times width times height. I want you to see the length is here, the width is here, and the height is here. So you don't count the same dimension twice when you're identifying what it is on your own. Don't forget. And then you might be given the base and the height, and that's when you use that formula. Okay, as always, I'll be there to support you. Sorry, this was a little harder of a concept to demonstrate due to how many rectangular prisms I had to draw, and that my board is meant for a 5-year-old, but the size of it, that is, it's meant for a little toddler. I'll give it to my niece or nephew when this is all over. But if you have any questions, conleymathathome@gmail.com. And boys and girls, if you have any questions, text me. We can draw on the screen and figure out what the length, width, and height is. Make sure you're labeling in cubic units or units cubed. If it's on the computer, you can just write cubic units. That'll do. Okay? Have fun with it. Try your best, and let me know if there's any questions.